Well, welcome everyone. My name is Paul White. I'm the Vice President of Member Services at the Foundation. It's great to have everyone here. As I just said, we have normally held our annual members meeting, which is a requirement of our bylaws, but it's actually a very useful thing for us to do, to get together with our members and share what we're working on, what our plans are, and to get feedback from our members. So we appreciate you all showing up. We are also going to record this session. We'll make these recordings available afterwards. So if you're watching this as a recording, welcome. And if you have questions, please reach out at any time and we'll get them answered for you. We have a very busy agenda with many of our leadership team kind of talking about the initiatives that we have within the foundation. So you'll see each of us actually covering different sections of what's happening within the foundation. And hopefully these things are of value to you as members. We've also asked Philip Strauss to come and speak a little bit about the what brought him to Eclipse and how he's engaged with us as a case study. So thank you, Philip, for joining us. As noted on the bottom of the slide, we welcome questions in the Zoom chat. We're going to ask everyone to stay muted just so we can get through all the material. There is a lot of it, but we will try to answer any questions in the chat, or each of the speakers can answer questions at the end of their section. And again, if you're watching this on a recording, just reach out at Eclipse Foundation and we will respond to you as quick as we can. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Milinkovich, our Executive Director, and let him provide his update.
All right, thanks, Paul, and welcome everybody. Thank you for making the time. Yeah, I think I've met a lot of people on the call over the years, but for those that I haven't met, welcome, and it's a pleasure to meet you virtually. So lots of things to talk about. Let's start off with our membership update. Actually, I'm gonna have to do the arithmetic in my head. We're currently well over 300 members, approaching 325 if I remember correctly. So we're obviously very happy about that. And you'll notice that there's a sort of a little bit of a step function there that happened at the very beginning of 2020, and that's influx of membership that came into us from a compliments of our friends and colleagues at the Open Hardware Group, which is a partnership that we have with a group that's doing open specifications for processor designs based on the RISC-V instruction set architecture. But we're obviously very pleased with the membership growth that we're seeing this year, and in particular, given the pandemic and COVID-19 and all the things that are going on in the world, continuing to see strong revenue growth, but strong membership growth and participation is obviously key. So these are our strategic members. Not in any particular order, near as I can tell, but these are the members that are funding the big dollars plus putting resources into our projects that help really drive our community and our foundation forward. There's been a couple of new ones there since the beginning of the year. DLR and Fraunhofer Focus both came in at the beginning of the year, and we talked about it at EclipseCon. When we'll get through this restructuring thing that I'll be talking about in a moment, but as we move to Belgium, we have an agreement already in place that Daimler TSS, their IT subsidiary, will be joining as a strategic member as well. On the committer side, we're a total of 1,630 committers as of September 30th, and so seeing over the year, seeing some growth there, and obviously very pleased about that. We were seeing steady growth in the committers. I probably should have done this chart to go back a couple of years, but a year or two ago, we crossed the 1,500 committer population, and we continue to see steady growth there. This is a bit of an eyeball chart, but we just wanted to call out and provide some graphical thank you for all of the new members that we've had since the last annual general members meeting. And so I'm not going to go through all of these because we would be here all day, but I just wanted to say and thank you and extend a warm welcome to the many companies that have joined the Eclipse Foundation over the last 12 months. All right, so I think actually, and just to mention in passing that I believe we've had a total of 81 new members join the Eclipse Foundation since the beginning of the year, which is obviously a great endorsement of our organization and our foundation. All right, so moving now to some news about membership. So we have been doing a bunch of work around our corporate restructuring. And in terms of what's going on with Eclipse Foundation US, for which this is the annual general meeting, the Eclipse Board of Directors unanimously approved a number of changes to our bylaws and our membership agreement. And we held a vote of the membership at large throughout the month of September. And those changes were approved by 97% of those who cast the vote. We did hit quorum, and we thank all of those who voted. Your participation and support are very much appreciated. So that was a significant amount of effort towards the end of Q3, and just again, thanks to everybody who took the time to vote. So changing now to financial update. So we started off the year with a 2020 budget that was suggesting we were going to get $6.9 million in total revenue. The bulk of that revenue is in membership dues and working group participation fees. That's the vast majority of that. And with a expense line of 6.9 million, so then break even was the expected budget. As we've gone through the year, obviously there's been an enormous number of changes that have happened around the world since when we did the budget, which would have been, Q4 2019. And as we did our forecast based on where we are, and this is a fairly recent forecast, we just did this in August and it was approved by the board in September. We are looking at a total revenue of 6.7 million, expenses of 6.6 million, showing a small surplus at the end of the year of about 100,000. The big change on the expense line, of course, is, as I'm sure many of you are aware in your own businesses and your own lives, we saved a lot of money on travel. So that's one of the biggest changes on the expense side. So I think it's important to note that the foundation continues to strive to operate on a break-even basis. That's always been part of our mission, and we are looking forward to having a small surplus, and which is, as you can see from a few years past, we ran some small deficits. So we're obviously very happy about that. And if you look at the 2019 actual, we're showing about $1 million more revenue than what we had in 2019, which is obviously a significant growth. And a lot of that is really driven by working groups. So we've had, and others will be talking about that later as we go through the day. So one of the things I really wanted to spend a little bit more time in, some of this, for some of you that attended our town halls and so on and other meetings, this will be a bit of a refresher. But since this is such a fundamental initiative that's happening at the Eclipse Foundation, I think it bears a few moments of everyone's time to go through what we're doing and why we're doing it. So in May, we announced that the Eclipse Foundation is moving to Europe. And so I've been asked a bazillion times since then, so Mike, are you moving to Brussels? And know that I and the staff in Ottawa are going to be staying in Canada. But what we are really doing is we are making ourselves a European-based organization based in Brussels, which is the capital of Europe, under European law, and operating as a European entity. And we're doing this to help grow the worldwide Eclipse ecosystem and attract and advance more strategic open source projects with a global impact. And so, we really see this as being an opportunity to differentiate the Eclipse Foundation and help us grow. There is a need for more international collaboration and innovation. Open source is absolutely critical to the global open source supply chain that's driving innovation around the world today. There's a number of strategic initiatives in Europe around digital competition, competitiveness, independence, sovereignty, citizen privacy, and the like, all of which have open source as a central part of those initiatives. And so Europe really requires an open source foundation with international reach and reputation, and we are striving to help meet that requirement. So as a European-based organization headquartered in Brussels, the Eclipse Foundation AISBL, we think is going to be uniquely positioned to help leverage the growth of our community and help foster global collaboration. We're looking at expanding our footprint into places like cloud, edge computing, AI, and so on. Some of these we've been in before, but doing so in a larger and more strategically supported way. So this is all about growth and acceleration of our growth. As I just mentioned, just on the revenue side, we are seeing significant growth, but we think we can have an even larger impact by virtue of this move to Europe. Which begs the question, what got you here? And I think part of it, I've told this story quite a few times. We had a board meeting last October. I was challenged as the executive director to take a look at why the Eclipse Foundation was doing so well in Europe and figure out ways to do even more. And it turned out when we ran the numbers that 70% of our paying members and 70% of our committers are based in Europe. 1/3 of our headcount is already based in Europe. And those three numbers, when you combine them in terms of our paying members, our committers, our staff, we already are the largest open source foundation in Europe. We've been operating a subsidiary in Europe for 7 years, so we understand what it takes to run a business in Europe. And Philippe Krief is going to be talking later about our European research programs. We're successful and well regarded in that area. So we've already got significant relationships with European policymakers and decision makers. As I said in the previous slide, Europe requires an open source foundation of international reach and reputation, and we want to be that organization. And it's important to recognize that this transition to Europe has been backed unanimously by the strategic members of the foundation. So every one of the strategic members that make up the bulk of our board of directors, the ones that are paying significant amount of funds and investing the most in terms of headcount and support of the Eclipse Foundation's community, they are unanimous in their support of this initiative. So what are we doing? It's been a lot of work, so we've filed to create a new Belgian international nonprofit. Those documents were filed back in August. As part of that, we created new bylaws and membership agreement. It's important to note that these bylaws also state that we are going to continue to comply with the nonprofit requirements of the United States as well. So we are basically, as a nonprofit, we are going to meet the legal and statutory requirements of both the US and Belgium as we continue to operate. And so that's partially because we want to, over time, transfer most of the assets out of the US entity into the into the Belgian entity. So unfortunately, we are now in a waiting mode. So we filed back in August, and the process in Belgium is they issue what's called a royal decree creating us as a nonprofit organization. Things are lagging a little bit in the Belgian government process because of COVID, and also they had a change of government, so things are taking a little longer, but hopefully soon we will be fully operational. In addition to that, we've also had to make a number of changes to align the Eclipse Foundation US, changes to the bylaws and membership agreement, which were approved by the membership at large. And that's all been taken care of now, and those new bylaws and membership agreement are active. And as soon as we get the royal decree and we become operational, we're going to be asking our members to transition from US to Belgium. So what you are going to be asked to do is execute a new membership agreement. If your organization are participating in any of our working groups, we will need to execute new participation agreements. And there's been revisions to our committer and contribution agreements. And so that will be, those will be done as well. Note that we're going to make sure that the change in membership won't change the anniversary of your membership. And so we're not going to be changing when your membership fees are due. But speaking of fees, it's important to recognize that we are going to be, we have changed our fees. These became effective October 1st. The most important thing is what we've done is restated our fees from US dollars to euros. For the first year, those fees will be discounted by 10% for existing members, thus allowing a transition year over year because of the exchange rate difference between the dollar and the euro. Both the US and Belgium will have an identical fee structure. And it's also important to note that although we're changing our membership fees, the working groups each continue to establish their own fee structure and will continue to operate in US dollars unless they choose themselves to revisit their fee structure and move to euros. The fees and the budget for each working group was within the discretion of that working group steering committee. So I anticipate that some will change over time, but that's not a requirement being driven by our transition to Europe. And it's also important to note this is the first time we've had a fee increase since 2006. But it's most of the reason why we did this was really, if we're going to be a European-based organization, stating our fees in euros definitely makes the most sense. We also changed our classes a little bit. So we used to have two classes of strategic members, strategic developer and consumer. We've collapsed those into a single class. We got rid of our enterprise class of membership and we renamed solutions member to contributing, basically because it's a more descriptive name for that class of membership. And so that's those changes were also approved when we approved the bylaws and the membership agreement. Going forward, one of the changes that's going to be happening as a result of basically a difference in law between the US and Belgium is that the General Assembly, which we've previously called the membership at large, has additional rights and responsibilities. So if we want to change the bylaws or the membership agreement, they have to be approved. That's not new. That's the way it's always been. But the General Assembly needs to approve the budget, the auditor, the acceptance of the audited financial statements, and ratify the appointments of board members. So all of those are new. And what that means is we anticipate that we're going to have more meetings of the General Assembly. We're going to feel this out as we go. We anticipate having at least two members meetings rather than the one that we have. We will require people to vote more often. Votes of our membership have been generally relatively rare. And in this case, we're going to, so this will have to happen more often. But electronic votes will be encouraged for those who cannot actually attend the meeting. So what's not changing? The governance structure is essentially the same. So we still have elected representatives for committers and contributing members. We've transitioned the board as is until elections are held in 2021. And the board and its committees, basically remain exactly the same as they have been over the years. We've done a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that our projects and working groups are not affected by these changes. The Architecture Council, the EMO, et cetera, all remain the same. All the core policies remain the same. There's been some recent updates to those, the IP policy and antitrust policy. these policies will be shared word for word identical between the US and the Belgian organization. And that's really what's allowing sort of this seamless collaboration across both sides as we transition our membership. And all of the Eclipse Foundation staff remain in place, largely in Canada and throughout Europe. That's going to continue, although of course we do expect to see greater headcount growth in Europe over time. And with that, I thank you. I could, what are we doing with questions, Paul?
There's time for a question or two, Mike, if people do have questions. There was one asked why we.
Maybe you stop sharing, and as you answer your question, I start sharing my screen.
Perfect. All right. So why Belgium? That's a good question. So we did actually look at options, and particularly we evaluated Switzerland, Switzerland and Germany, both which have a construct called Verein. And we also looked at the Belgian one, and we decided on the Belgian one largely because they had recently created a very specific new type of organization called an international nonprofit association. And it was effectively an exact fit for what we were trying to do. And so that was, when we started off this exercise, Gael could, reinforce this because he was the one who actually found this and pointed me at it. I was completely expecting that we would end up being a German Verein. The other reason, of course, is that in Europe, Brussels is the capital and Belgium is considered sort of the neutral home of Europe. Whereas if we'd been a German entity or a French entity, there's always that sort of European, well, you're European, but you're German, as opposed to by legally domiciling in Belgium, it's clear that we are a truly European organization. And I think that's
the only question in the chat. So just to mention again that we will be, once we get this final approval from the government, we'll be reaching out to each of our members and asking you to make the migration here from having your membership with the US organization to your membership with the Belgian organization. So we'll walk you through it. We'll give you the details of what's required. And if, I'm sure many of your organizations will have questions, either legal or otherwise, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go through it. And we appreciate everybody's support in trying to make this transition work. It will take a few months for us to get through it with all of the 300+ members that we have, but we'll do it as efficiently as we can and share information as we go to make the process easier for those who come behind.
So Michael Manella just asked a question about the timeline. It's basically as soon as we get the royal decree, we're going to be starting to approach members to transition their membership agreements, largely based on their renewal dates. So obviously we don't have the administrative staff to do everybody at once. So it'll be a process, but as soon as we get the royal decree, we will be starting to approach members to transition their membership.
And when do we get the royal decree? That's up to the government. Like, who knows? It's
a black box of bureaucracy at the moment.
Yes, sir. All right, Mike, thank you very much for the update. It's appreciated, and hopefully that's useful for folks. Again, reach out if you have questions after this. I know this is a lot of moving pieces from a governance point of view, but it's steady as she goes in the projects and working groups. So